All right, here we go. All right, for the EQ crew for November, we have our workshop series. I'm actually doing a unique one for a live cast here on TikTok as well on letting go of loneliness. This was a topic that was brought up from our emotional intelligence crew members. They were interested in exploring how to let go of loneliness, right? Loneliness is something that a lot of people are experiencing, especially post-pandemic. And we are approaching this topic from the perspective of your personality and why loneliness actually even comes up and how to address it. So we're going to dive in. Let's jump into it. What we're talking about today, what exactly is loneliness? What does that even mean? What does that mean? What does it feel like? We're going to talk about a reflection exercise at the end, which is going to be a helpful takeaway for those who are looking to get more socially and emotionally fit. We're also going to talk about your personality and how feeling lonely is also tied to how you think and how you make decisions and how you tend to get energy in your environment. And we're also going to talk about how to let go of loneliness, which is tied to the exercise at the end. So let's jump into it. What is loneliness? Okay, what exactly does that mean? Loneliness is a state of distress or discomfort that results from a perceived gap between your desired social connections and the actual experience of the connection. Okay? Now, this is a definition that is pulled from Psychology Today. You know, they got a bunch of psychologists over there, a bunch of therapists as well. I am a life coach, right? I don't delve into any sort of clinical practice. I have a coaching practice where I help everyday people learn and apply emotional intelligence to improve their relationships and improve their professional lives as well. So, loneliness, a state of distress or discomfort that results from a perceived gap between one's desired social connection and the actual experiences of it. So, think about the last time you felt lonely, right? Think about the last time you felt that. What did it feel like? And for those who are here on my live, this will be on YouTube as well. But I got a little presentation here. This is what people are seeing. Again, this will be live on YouTube when I'm done. But so think about the last time you felt lonely. Okay, loneliness feels kind of like this, sort of like you're empty, right? Like there's just like there's lack of presence. And I know a lot of other kind of influencers kind of talk about loneliness. I think Jordan Peterson is one. I think he brought up loneliness amongst men. But despite the gender or sex component related to this feeling, every human being experiences loneliness. Okay? Everybody does. But the way to let it go has to do with this key part of the definition. The perceived gap. Okay? Is there currently a gap between your desire for social connection and your actual experience of it? I am here to tell you, it likely is a gap, okay? If you overuse social media, there is likely a gap between your true desires for social connection and your actual experience of it, all right? We're going to unpack this further, and we're going to talk about how this relates to your personality, all right? Again, for folks that are just now watching, EI Guy here. I am doing a live workshop for our emotional intelligence crew members on letting go of loneliness. All right, so when you feel lonely, what emotions come to mind? And for folks watching, this is one of my favorite tools to show. It is showing the wheel of emotions, okay? So when you feel loneliness, what of these emotions tend to pop up? And I will highlight some that I think are relatively common and related to feeling lonely. Number one is feeling neglected. That is an emotion that typically comes up for people. Another emotion that I think comes up for folks is, it looks like somebody said rejection. when you get rejected. Definitely an experience I felt when on the dating scene back in the day. Rejection, neglection, okay? Disappointment. A lot of different emotions tend to show up when you're feeling lonely. Now, why is this important? Oh, fear. Yes, indeed. Fear is another emotion that pops up. This is important to put language to your emotions because it makes it easier for you to process. If you're experiencing loneliness and you're not taking the time to unpack how it may be, weaving its way into other emotions that are popping up for you, fear, rejection, feeling neglected, regretful, it is highly possible that you may start to internalize these feelings of loneliness and the cycle would just continue, right? Because you're not fully processing the emotions that come with loneliness, but also the feeling of loneliness itself. Wow. Right? Isn't that interesting? So let's keep on pressing ahead. Many folks, and I wrote about this in a newsletter that I dropped. You can get my free newsletter. It's called The Social Gym in my link in bio. I wrote actually about this 2 weeks ago. And much of what I wrote is actually in this presentation. So if you don't want to hear me talk and you would rather read, go get my free newsletter. But if you want to see my beautiful face talk about emotional and social skill related topics, you can find me here. So one of the core results of loneliness is authentic connection, or the lack of authentic connection, right? If you do not have authentic connection in your life, it is likely driven by this one thing. It is likely driven by this one thing. This one thing is mindlessness. Okay? Now, why do I say that? Why does the EI guy say that? The source of loneliness, which is typically lack of authentic connection, is driven by mindlessness. Why do I say that? I say that because we live in an age where each and every day we engage in mindlessness on the internet. This very app we're on, right? If you stumbled upon my live video and you stopped here just to listen for a little bit, this is an example of, if you ever heard of mindlessly scrolling on TikTok, I actually just made a TikTok about that. You ever just find yourself just swiping, you're just going, right? Relentlessly. That is an example of mindlessness, all right? You're not you're not building authentic connection via social media. And social media is where a lot of people spend their time. So if where you're spending time is reinforcing your mindlessness, and we know mindlessness leads to a lack of authentic connection, then we are going to perpetuate or initiate feelings of loneliness. Okay, right? And let's be honest with ourselves. Mindlessness is frequent. It shows up often in our lives as hollow, inauthentic connection, right? And here's how to know. Think about your use of social media. How many authentic connections, authentic relationships have you built through social media? Think about from the time you downloaded the app, or even if you've been on MySpace, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, how many mindful, authentic connections have you built? My guess is it's probably no more than a handful. Probably no more than a handful, right? Someone said 2. And think about how many people are on these applications. Billions of users, okay? So it's important to recognize that social media, or these tools, are supposed to help us in tap into a way to establish more authentic connection, right? And by the way, there is no set number on how much you need, right? I think typically, human beings, we're talking through the dawn of time, smaller groups tend to be more impactful over the long run, right? I'm thinking maybe 5 to 7 meaningful relationships, meaningful connections in your life. But social media has put in front of us billions of connections, billions of people, and yet the overwhelming result that is being identified is mindlessness. So, how exactly is this related to our personality, and more importantly, how do we resolve this stuff, right? How do we take action that, one, lets us overcome and let go of the feeling of loneliness, but also get at the root, which is the mindlessness, right? So, personality, right? I am a big fan of personality frameworks. If you know about the Myers-Briggs type indicator, I'm a certified practitioner of it, and I use it in my practice to help people engage in effective self-discovery. So, feeling lonely, dealing with mindlessness, how is this related to your personality? Well, number one, I want to talk about extroverts and introverts, okay? Extroverts typically are energized by social interactions, and they focus on breadth and variety, okay? They tend to focus on a lot of different people and a variety of different people. Introverts, on the other hand, typically are energized by inner experiences, ideas, and focus on depth and reflection, okay? So, in conversations I was having with really important relationships in my life, we discussed this idea of loneliness in extroverts and introverts. And what logically made sense to us, and I'm actually curious, if you're watching this, you can chime in as well. We noticed that it's possible that extroverts likely feel loneliness less often, but with more intensity. I want to repeat that. Extroverts likely feel loneliness less often, but with more intensity. Why is that? Extroverts prefer to be around a variety of people. However, with that variety comes likely mindlessness, okay? Inauthentic connections. So an extrovert may find themselves with a lot of different people around them and nobody to talk to sometimes about what really matters. And when that happens, an extrovert likely feels that loneliness with more intensity, way more intensity, right? And what is an extrovert to do with those emotions? What is an extrovert to do with that loneliness? I will get to that near the end when we talk about how extroverts, in particular, like if you're an extrovert and you're watching this and you're experiencing loneliness, I have a tip for you. I got a tactic, a tip. And this will also help with the intensity of that emotion. Now to introverts. By the way, if you didn't know, the data shows that most people are introverted, which is pretty fascinating. I'm an extrovert, if you were curious. The EI guy. My name's Oren, by the way. I am an extrovert. So, introverts likely feel loneliness more often, but with less intensity. I'll repeat that. Introverts likely feel loneliness more often, but with less intensity. Now that begs the question, why is that? Well, typically introverts more often than not prefer alone time, and they prefer smaller groups or no groups. Okay? Depends on your vibe. But typically introverts are looking at smaller groups, smaller intimate settings, or no group, and they just want to be with themselves. Solitude, right? So, while a feeling of loneliness may emerge more often for an introvert, it may not be as intense. In part because they may be used to it. They may be used to being alone a little bit, right? Their brain, their mind has adapted to smaller groups, being by themselves, right? So in this case, an introvert may not see lonely as that troubling of an emotion to experience. May not, right? I would be curious to hear what some introverts' thoughts are on this and if they felt loneliness before and how they've, kind of coped with it. But this is our hypothesis here, right? This is our hypothesis. It's that introverts feel loneliness more often, but it's not as intense. So, now, the one of the key ways to, again, let go, because this is the main theme of this whole live and this workshop that I'm doing, on letting go of loneliness, it starts from the inside out.